We're back out here once again, and today we're talking about how you can have the perfect color dialed in and still not be getting any bites. We're talking all about colors, the right ways to use them, the wrong ways to use them, and we're going to be dispelling a few myths in the process. Stick around, you don't want to miss this one. Ooh, there we go. I got him. He came up after it too. And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have a chance to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing. And if you ask a lot of anglers, they will tell you that the most critical and vital part of their presentation is the color. They want to make sure they have that color dialed in, that every nuance about it is absolutely perfect. From the shade of green, to the perfect color flake in their plastics, to even the accents, whether they want to add a little methylate, whether they want to add a little chartreuse. Everything about that color has got to be absolutely perfect. But I'm here to tell you, color doesn't matter all that much. Now sure, it can play a factor in getting bites, attracting fish, and not getting bites. But it's not nearly in the way that most anglers think it is. See, we think the very first thing we need to choose whenever we're picking a bait is the color. And that's not really the best way to go about it. Myself, the first thing I do is I look at the conditions on the water, and I let those bass dictate to me what it is they might be in the mood for, and that's what I start with. Now granted, color is a part of that, but it's not the main part. The first thing I'm looking at is conditions. The second thing I'm looking at is how those bass might be behaving, how they might be setting up, and then I'm using the color. But that color is based, number 3, specifically because of how I use colors on my baits. Now, something like this, right? We've got a typical green pumpkin style worm. It's got a little bit of green flake in it. This is going to be your quote-unquote natural color. This is going to be something like whenever you hear the term match the hatch. We hear it all the time. Match the hatch. But matching the hatch is more than just color. It's an entire system. You have to get the color right, but you have to get the way you present that color right. What do I mean? Well, I'm not going to be using this out deep for suspended bass. Why? Because those bass aren't necessarily looking for prey species or food items that are this color under that situation. And that's exactly the heart of what I'm trying to talk about. Colors are very situational, and we have to use them in those terms. If I'm using something like white, white is a great color. It's an amazing color, and it stands out so often. But I'm not just using it willy-nilly. I'm using it in the right situations under the right applications. Something like this white fluke, I'm not dragging this. Now, granted, you can catch a fish doing pretty much anything, so I don't want to hear you say, hey, lowbrow, I caught fish dragging a fluke on the bottom. Sure, you absolutely can do that, but as a general rule of thumb, it's not going to happen all that often. This, I'm working more in the middle of that water column where those bass are going to be expected to see smaller bait fish, the little fry, the little shad, the little bluegill that they're chasing. That's where I'm working this. I'm working this closer to the surface, down to the middle of that water column. And I find that I'm having a great amount of success. And that even applies to the hard baits I'm using, not just the plastics. Like this guy right here. This is that good old Yo-Zuri jerkbait. This thing has been a real trooper for me. Tied it on just the other day, and it wasn't long before, well, I got this little guy to show himself. All right, we've got the old white Yo-Zuri jerkbait tied on with actually a shad pattern. And we're going to kind of work it around here. Got some wind-driven current today, which is nice. Ooh, there we go. I got him. He came up after it too. There we go. You got a little bitty mouth, but you got a pretty good sized body. That's kind of strange. I know you're not a spot because, well, they don't have spots in this lake. You are a beautiful, beautiful little bass. We will take you all day long. Alright, let me get my... Now he's got the head of a dink and the body of a 1-pounder. Not a bad fish. Not quite a pound, three-quarters of a pound, a little bit more than that, not quite a pound. Nice little fish. Thank you, buddy. And there he goes. Let's catch another one. Okay, so are we going to be using a jerkbait in thick vegetation? Probably not. You could try it, but I wouldn't recommend it. You're going to have more of a hard time than you think you will. So obviously you're going to be going for something like this fluke on a weightless Texas rig or something of that nature to cut through that grass. And in those situations, that's kind of what those bass are looking for. Those little bait fish darting around that vegetation, that's what they are expecting to see. Whenever you get out in a little bit deeper water, and whenever I was using this, that water that I was in when I caught that fish was maybe 5 or 6 feet deep. It wasn't super deep. It was still actually pretty shallow, but there wasn't a lot of vegetation coming up through. There wasn't a lot of emergent vegetation. There was a lot of submergent vegetation. I had a couple of feet between where the water surface is and where the top of those plants were. So I was working in that area. And again, those are the types of places that those bass are expected to see those types of colors. It's like, well, when I was working out a little bit deeper, I found some logs that were sticking up. I found some trees that were sticking up, and I never really got a chance to fish those that much. I tied on this 6XD, and again, this is the type of color that those bass are looking for in that area. A sunfish pattern would also work. And I was able to, within quick order, just a few casts, I was able to pull a nice bass off of one of those trees down near the bottom of it. And that bass, as you can see here on the video, completely and totally inhaled that bait. It's exactly what you want to see. When you match the bait type up with the color type up, you are seeing those bass inhale that bait. That means you've got everything right, and things should be rolling from then on out. But if you're using something, well, let's use a craw for an example, right? You hear people say, well, that craw is molting. Those craw are bright red. Well, do you honestly think those bass expect to see a crawfish in 30 feet of water floating just a few feet below the surface? That's not where crawfish are, right? And when it comes to something like a soft plastic bait, right? A craw bait like a rage craw or a Guggen Kraken craw, both of which I really like. I'm not using those in places where there's a lot of thick hydrilla, even though that's shallow, even though there may be craw in there. But that's not generally how the bass work on my fishery. I'm looking for a dry mud bottom, a harder bottom, maybe around some clay, maybe around some rock, if I can find it. Because in my fishery, that's where those crawfish tend to congregate, and that's where the bass on my fishery are expecting to see them. So whenever I use that mentality, whenever I pair up not just the color that I want to use, right? Oh, we want to match the hatch, we want to use the natural color, but I'm also pairing that up with the area the bass are expecting to see that color. A lot of times you hear guys say the color is the most important part. Well, the color is not as important as most anglers give it credit for. Again, it can play a role, but you have to use it in the right fashion, in the right way. That's why there's a lot of guys that go out on the water and they go time and time again, and they're using some of their favorite colors. Well, like Junebug. Junebug is one of those crazy colors, and it took me a while, right? Why can I use this on the bottom, and why can I use this in clearer water near the surface? And I finally figured it out. There's something that this resembles, believe it or not, that kind of makes this matching the hatch. What is it? An insect. Dragonflies on my fishery, a lot of them have this type of color. So I can work it, like right now we've got the dragonfly mating season, and you see a lot of those dragonflies on the surface of the water. This can mimic a dragonfly fairly accurately. Also, whenever I'm fishing deeper water, that Junebug kind of sticks out. It kind of stands out against that background. And I'm using that to attract those bass's curiosity whenever that bite is really finicky. Again, I'm using color in a different way. I'm not necessarily trying to say, hey, this is a piece of food, come eat me, as much as I'm saying, hey, this is curious, come check it out, and I bet you'll want to taste it. And that's where something like Junebug really comes into play. That's where you can use it in multiple instances and multiple situations. Where something like this electric blue, now this is really killer in the wintertime, this is really killer in the springtime, and the reason being is because those bass are basically biting anything. Color really doesn't play that much of a role in my fisheries around the springtime. And even whenever that fall feed starts up, those bass, well, they're looking for anything that they can inhale to fatten their bellies. So as we get into maybe October and November, something like this is really going to be a player. And then again, in January and February up and through early March, I can get away with using something like that. But it's not about imitating something those bass are going to be eating. It's more about drawing their curiosity. So keep that in mind. Remember, if you're using the fish in the right way, if you're using the bait colors in the right way, and you're matching everything together into a cohesive package, that is way more enticing to those bass than just saying, hey, I'm going to use this color today, and that's the color I'm going to stick to. Because a lot of times, you might luck out, and you might say, hey, this is the right spot, and those bass will actually inhale it. Or you might be putting it in places that those bass, they're not looking to see it in that area, and those bites really dry up. So there you have it. My comprehensive system for using color choice for my baits. I find it works way better than just trying to guess what those colors are. It gives my colors purpose, and it helps me really dial in that presentation to be as efficient and effective as possible. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.